I thought I'd just jump into something today on more of like a personal note and sharing some of the weird things I've observed in my personality over time. And my thinking behind doing this is just for me personally, when I watch YouTube videos or I tune into any kind of content, I find that I get more value from just hearing people authentically speak about their own experience than tell me certain things about how this works or that works. And I think that's just because I'm very subjectively oriented and I sort of learn more from story and character. And that just got me thinking, like, there are so many random things that I've come to see about how I think and how I make sense of things over time. And I thought maybe I just share some of them on the YouTube. So let's get into some of those things now. So one of the first things that came into my head is like, it's taken me a while to learn how fixated I tend to get on things and how other people don't really do that. I notice now that what people seem to do a lot of the time, like maybe more neurotypical people, is they have like allocated levels of energy that all fit across a kind of a board with things that they do in their life. And, you know, it's not perfectly straight. Like, I think most people would be more interested in this thing over here probably than something they were doing at work or vice versa. But I think with people, it generally seems to balance out such that there's like a well-roundedness around the things that they're into. And something else I notice is that I think not having gone to high school, I don't think I got to see how good people can become at doing things that they don't really like or they don't really care about. And now that I'm older and I meet more people and I just like go to different places, I realize like, wow, a lot of people spend most of their time doing things that they don't really want to do. And it's like they've learned how to acclimate to doing that, you know? I think I said in the last video release that I recently met like a litigations lawyer, and this person interested me so much because they were telling me how like they went through something like 6 years of law school and then worked as a lawyer for around 5 years. So like 10, 11 years total time, and didn't like it at all. Like they just weren't into it. And they just did it because they thought it was a good career option. Like they knew they didn't like it from when they started studying it, and then still didn't like it as they were actually practicing law, but continued to do it. And it was just mind-blowing to me to think that you would spend like maybe potentially like an eighth or a ninth of your life involved in something that you don't like, because that's so different to how I would think about something. I think that it's almost impossible for me to concentrate on things if I'm not relatively interested in them. I don't think that I have a kind of a deficit of attention, so to speak. It's more that just I think I'm more selective with it. And anyway, to what I was saying initially there, I think I've just noticed that most people's attention and interest seems to be more balanced overall, where I think I'll have like, if you imagine my mind is like a Bethesda game, I'll have like 100 points stacked in one thing and then like no points in another. Like, it's like, then I just won't put any effort into that thing over there because I'm so disinterested in it that it's almost imperceptible to me that it matters. You know what I mean? It's like, it goes straight by me. And obviously, as I've got deeper into my 20s, there are certain things now that I just have to that I have to focus on more. And I've kind of learnt that thing that I think most people, like I said before, have learned in high school naturally, which is just, okay, I need to make sure, you know, like that my house is tidy and clean, or like, I need to make sure that I like get to work on time and do this and that. Where like when I was younger, like that, none of that just all kind of didn't really occur to me. I know that sounds weird, but it's just, it didn't click into me. So I've noticed over time that with my personality, I'm able to put everything and get like almost hyper fixated on the things that I actually care about, to the point where I don't think I notice. Also, this is the other side of it. I don't think that I was aware up until maybe more recently that other people just don't base their whole lives around the things that they value the most and that they care about. Like, they might get interested in a theme or a topic of some kind, or like a subculture, or like they might sort of, what's the word? Like, they shop around. They'll kind of go into it and be like, oh, there's this and that. I'm kind of interested in this. Where for me, it almost feels like as soon as I get involved with the thing, I'm fucking all the way to the back of it, you know, like I'm really, really into the thing once I am. And it's taken me a while to realize that people don't do that a lot of the time. So the whole way that I utilize my attention, it's not that I haven't met other people who do this as well. I actually have like at least a few friends who are on a similar wavelength with this. But it's taken me a while to realize that the way that I'm using my attention is in a different stack than a lot of the people around me. And I think the positives of it are, when I get involved in something, when I get interested in something, I really get involved and interested in it. And I almost I become like naturally quite disciplined in the thing, because I understand the value of sticking into something to really learn the subtleties of it and learn what it's like and experience. Like, I think I've learnt how to learn over time. And I also know that the deeper enjoyment and the riches of something come when you really give yourself to the process. It's like there's kind of this absorption and this devotion in the thing, whether it's a kind of literature, just some interest that you have, whether it's relationships with people. The deeper you go down that rabbit hole, obviously that's where most of the juicy stuff is. But I think some of the negatives are, like I said before, like it comes sometimes at the behest of being able to balance your attention out. Like, obviously we live in a world where we have to be responsible, independent adults, and the world values like 8 or 10 different features in personalities and humanity. So if you're someone who has more eccentric tastes or interests, the world doesn't just recognize you as valuable in that area and then think like, oh, okay, well, you will just be adjudicated to the philosophy department of the society and won't worry about that other stuff because you clearly work differently. It's like, no, you still have to do everything everyone else does, which I'm not complaining about. I think makes total sense. But yeah, that was kind of a slow burn for me. And I think that in reflection, this sort of like fixation and only being able to do things that I've been interested in has actually got me in a lot of trouble throughout particularly my teens and early 20s. And it's kind of taken me reformulating how I think about this kind of thing in order to get a better understanding and grasp on how to balance my attention. Another thing I've noticed following on from the first point, and I'll just ask you to be a little bit patient with me, I find that my thinking is best if I do it in real time. So before I was trying to think, how can I say this? But then I think I kind of need the pressure of being on the edge a little bit to come up with the best way of articulating what I mean. And this is not an easy thing to say. I think that because, like I said at the last point, because I've been so deeply interested in all the things I have and put no energy into the other stuff, or very little into the other stuff, I think what has started to develop over time is more of a sensitivity to the reasons behind why people become interested in certain bodies of information or themes or subcultures and things like that. So, for example, if you take something like metal music, right? I think that one way of looking at it is just like, oh, metal is just this like conglomeration of different individuals who like angry music, and that's like the superficial way. It's just like people like angry music, and then maybe if you go a bit deeper, it's like, well, maybe they have some anger, and because they have some anger, they like angry music, and that's that. But then you could sort of go a layer deeper than that, and then you start having to sort of you start speculating on why they're actually attracted to that outlet. And for example, you might think, people like metal culture maybe because they have some level of anger inside of them, but they also don't maybe have direct contact with it. So the outlet allows that part of them to be accessed so they can experience it in a way where there's acceptance and understanding from a group around them. And then also outside of that, maybe it helps them understand and validate and sort of match their emotions to a theme better so they can have a clearer sense of who they are. That would be like a layer deeper that would require you to sort of omit some of the typical judgment that might go into that community, for example. But then it's almost like you can go further and further and further with these layers because you don't just look at the individual who's involved with the process, but you're also looking at the art itself, right? Like, what is the point of this art? Is it just a replica of the individual, but the individual has more of a creative temperament such that they would prefer to make something rather than just be a consumer of it? Or is it the fact that they are able to put their own feelings and thoughts into like a vessel of music in this way, and that they never really knew how it would work in the community, and maybe there's something that comes out of that where they do find a synergy with the people. So there's lots of different ways that you can come to look at these themes and subcultures. And I think another thing is my way of seeing a theme or a subculture, or we could say like a body of thought, a body of information, I think has sort of changed over time to being more conventional in the sense that I just mentioned, where it's like just a bunch of different individuals with like similar belief systems based on temperament and experience, which I'm not trying to say that that's not a thing. I do think that is like the surface level of a body of information or a belief. But then I think if you go further with it, I think for me, like my point of view has become almost more like a Platonic form perspective, where it almost seems like, this is going to be very esoteric and weird to explain. It almost seems like to me there's actual existential qualities or features, like there are forces, and if you take a theme or a group or a subculture, the subculture is almost like a cloud drive of stored information rather than just a bunch of people exchanging thoughts and feelings. It almost becomes like an accumulated mass that then has its own autonomous existence outside of just the people who subjectively come together to subscribe to the thing, right? So if you take something like metal in the prior example, rather than metal just being, again, just a bunch of people who have this idea of this thing called metal, it's almost like, I think we see this even more with the internet, it's almost like there's this accumulated body of this theme of metal that kind of exists of its own accord now, and this cloud drive of metal reflects these different qualities, and it reflects them in a myriad of different ways, right? Like, again, we could liken it back to the example of like the surface being, it maybe reflects anger, but then underneath that reflection of anger, maybe there's something liberating about it. So it reflects these different qualities. And as a theme itself, as a cloud of information, what people do is they both take from that cloud of information and they also provide to it at the same time. It's almost like a towel in that sense. It's like it becomes, it absorbs the quality of the person. The towel analogy being that it gets wetter and drier at the same time. It's like that old riddle. But it also is, people are sort of like rinsing the value out of it. And this is where I think you start to come, or for me, you start to come to see what personality is a little bit more existentially, rather than just a bunch of models and theories about it. Like we've talked about that on this channel before, models and theories and all that. But what I think personality actually is it's kind of like the intersection between the quality or the culture or the thing that's being related to, and then all of the features of the individual, the temperament and the sort of system of the individual. And by that I mean that if you say, like we keep using the example of metal, we should change it to something else. Let's say, God, what's a subculture or something like that? Let's say it's like maybe even like sports. There are certain features that come through something like sports that can exist as their own thing. I think they have kind of like they're like these independent clouds. And maybe with sports, you could say something like community. You could also say that it has the features of something like triumph and sticking together. So like, community, camaraderie, connection. I think they're like the sort of higher manifestations of something like sports in this case. But then you could take the individual, and you recognize that individuals appreciate and come to value the cloud or the body of information or culture in different ways, right? Like some individuals will have a sort of flatter affect in the sense that they might not like going to a sports game. They might be quite introverted, even though they appreciate those certain qualities that sports has. They might not actually like going to the game as such. It's almost like something they prefer to enjoy by themselves. And I think that's when you start to see personality forming, because it's sort of like the ability to register and involve oneself with these qualities, with these forces, these kind of like these, I said it's like almost like a Platonic way of looking at it. But simultaneously, it's what you bring to it and what you take from it at the same time. It's the intersection of other and self. And that vescopisis that is created there is like the personality, right? I mean, if you ask someone, I'm not trying to get into like a whole spiel about what personality is here, but we do that on this channel. We get off topic, so deal with it. If you ask someone typically what personality is, I think that in common parlance, we would say something like personality is the things that I'm interested in. I like reading books, so that's a part of my personality. But then again, you start peeling back the layers of what that means, and it's like, well, what do you mean by you like books? What you're really saying is that there's something that comes through this literature, this book, that relates to your temperament and your preferences, and that sort of fusion of those things has this sense of you-ness to it. Right, it's like self or personality seems to exist as kind of like an intermediary principle between objective, other, and then subjective interpretation. And I think that would be across the board, whether you're more extroverted and objectively oriented or introverted and subjectively oriented either. You know, it's just there's a spectrum of it. The variations of how it comes to be and its perceptual filters are different, but still, generally speaking, I think that's an across-the-board thing. So anyway, I gave that whole foundational thing just to say that how it relates to me is that I feel that over time, what's started to happen is when someone presents me with some information, whether it's about themselves or a situation, and like, look, I'm not always just like sitting there beard stroking and analyzing everything anyone says to me. I don't have the I don't think anyone would have the time or energy or patience to always do that. Plus it would mean that you lived in a state of constant neurotic anxiety of if people are telling the truth. I think over time this comes to just be, or for me it's come to just be something I kind of feel in my gut. But when information is presented to me, I'm not just listening to what's being presented to me or what I'm seeing, but I think my mind is more naturally attuned as to like where it's coming from or what the motive is. And again, it's a subconscious process. It's not like I'm then usually thinking, what is this person trying to find in themselves through this interest, or why do they like that? Or it's more of just like organically being more aware of the governing or arbitering processes around why someone does something or is interested in something, you know. And I think that actually gives you it makes people and events and circumstances a lot more interesting, because it's the mental side of kind of like I'd say almost you could say like it's kind of like spirituality, in the sense that it's the interconnectedness of all things, but it's how it reflects through the mind. It's being able to recognize that I'm not just sitting and looking into a camera, but I'm also making something for a group of people. And the fact that I'm making it for the group of people, and that if anyone enjoys it, which I don't know if they will, but that will reflect that there's some group of people out there who like that kind of thing, which means that there's a body of thought that is not just bound by distance and location. Some of my viewers are in America or Canada or South Africa or whatever. It means that there's this kind of body of thought that people tune into and maybe relate to or don't relate to. And so, and then, there's a reasoning behind why you would want to hear someone talk, or why you would be this far in the video listening to this person waffle on. Because there's something to that. There's something palpable to that, right? So I think that that's something that I've noticed has happened for me over time, is I've become more interested in the underlying features as to why something is the way it is, why someone might have a motive or an interest in this thing, or why this group or subculture presents this certain value or ideology in the way that they do. And this is something that is really important that we do as people in general, I think. I don't just mean, I'm not just trying to say it's like, well, I've figured out this way of doing it that's very refined. It's like, no, but I think in general, it's important that we understand that there are deeper layers to our motivations and our interests and our preferences. Because if we weren't to do that, we would be at risk of just following anything that kind of made us feel good, which obviously leads to traps. Like we could easily go into addiction like that, for example, or we could become identified with and fight for an ideology that might be quite unsavory or even hostile. And we did it maybe not with bad intent, but it's just that we were manipulated emotionally because this emotion that was governing why we did the thing was basically subconscious to us. So it was running how we operated without necessarily us having the light of awareness surrounding it to be able to illuminate the process and thereby detach from it and make a more free will oriented decision as to how and use faculties like critical thinking. And I think you can see this played out a lot, for example, in the political arena. There's a lot of good data that suggests that a lot of people who would vote for certain people, without naming names, don't actually know much about their policies, right? And the information that we do know about their policies when we would vote for them is not necessarily a well-rounded form of information in that sense that takes into account both sides, but it's largely biased based on an emotional bias that lies just beneath the facts that we're cherry picking in order to present a particular argument and convince ourselves and other people of the value of the thing, or of the importance of the thing. There's actually this idea of, if you ever heard of like the RAS, the reticular activation system, it's this idea that once you start believing something, once you start to see something as true, you notice it everywhere. And I do believe that that's very much true, like I said, in the political landscape, for example, but it can also be played out in the religious landscape. We have to recognize that our subjectivity and what we believe, what we see as good and true and valuable, and what we see as wrong, we keep investing in that point of view. And that lens becomes what we see reality through. Right? So we start to render this over everything. There's a saying in Zen where they say perception fits over experience like a straitjacket. And obviously in the context of Zen Buddhism, they're talking about it from the goal being sort of like breaking away from perception in that way. I'm just exploring my perceptions here. But anyway, I spoke for like 15 minutes on that. Point being, just over time becoming more aware of the motivations or underlying forces or features behind behavior, choices and decisions, both in myself and other people, positives of which have made life significantly more interesting, and the negatives of which I think it's like there's like a kind of I think as this happens, for me, I've noticed that like it's almost like your discriminative faculties are more refined. So your ability to discern between if something could potentially be valuable or not. But then sometimes you just kind of get a bad sense. Like I said, it's like you get a bad sense about something, and you can tell around you that certain people really get something out of it. But for you, it feels transparent, and that can be difficult, for example, like people you're close to. Like I have a friend, I won't mention what the topic is, but he's really interested in this certain field or topic. And I can tell for him that he just happens to believe this is the future of humanity, and it's the only, like, it's the best thing, and that anyone who doesn't understand it is just kind of ignorant. But for me, like, I don't really even feel that I have to investigate it. Maybe that's a limitation on my part, and I have thought about it a bit, but it almost just seems to me like his motivation behind why is quite clear, and it's kind of locked into his own belief system, but it doesn't, it sort of feels like it goes flat, and it's quite emotionally oriented, and the level of information that's presented is not really that refined a lot of the time, and just, it kind of just flops is what it seems to be like for me. And that can be difficult because you kind of want to be, you want to feel the connection aspect of being involved and sharing ideas with one another. But sometimes there's kind of like a line that can be drawn there. So yeah, there's certain negatives to it as well. Last one I'll put in this video, and I think I'll do other videos on this because there's so many of these things that like come up in my mind. The last one, I thought about this just then as I was finishing the last point. The last one would be, I think I've come to see how there's a dichotomy oftentimes between love and truth, and they're just kind of like pointer words that we're using to make sense of what I mean here. You don't have to attach to them and like, what is love though ultimately, or what is truth? But in this case, I mean them in a more colloquial sense, like to stay to the value of truth with something, and you know, we could also then further expand that to being like authenticity in your interactions with people and your choices. And then also love being the connective agent, which often involves agreeableness. Like agreeableness actually is more of a connecting feature. It's one of the big 5 personality trait features. And it's incredibly important that people are agreeable, because although disagreeable people would have certain advantages in some areas, which is proven, if people weren't agreeable, we would have all died out by now. Right? It's our ability to be agreeable that puts love into the equation. And it's not all love. It's not just, you know, we're not pulling a Beatles here. It's not all you need is love. Truth is extremely important, maybe even more important, but we need to be able to balance those features, because truth is something in the relative domain that's highly subjective. Okay, what's happened there is that my camera has run out of battery, so I'm just going to try to pick up where I left off there. When it comes down to it, truth is extremely subjective. Truth in the relative domain is very subjective. And we're not talking about some absolute truth that might be at the bottom of some awakening experience or some sort of piercing the veil recognition. But more in the relative sense, we all have different definitions of what is true. We contextualize reality in different ways. And this often means that we're going to have disagreements with one another, right? And if you want to hold true to the value of authenticity and having authentic connections with the people around you and living an authentic life, you are going to have to hold true to your beliefs. And not only do you have to internally hold those things, but you need to be able to interject those that what is your truth at the time into your relationships, whether it be in your intimate relationships, work relationships, the way you do art, anything like that. And there is a certain satisfaction that comes with when you know that you're making something or you're interacting in a way that is very truthful. But at the same time, if you take, for example, someone who is very disagreeable, but is also like quite true to themselves, yes, in some ways they have a certain integrity and authenticity, but a lot of these people can have major issues in their relationships, and their connective ability is it's not as good a lot of the time, right? Someone very disagreeable will run into that a lot because they don't seem to really value or pick up on certain aspects of the love quality. Like, I think it's quite easy for some of us to miss that validating someone's point of view, being encouraging, and sort of just allowing them to talk it out without necessarily making it something else or correcting or interjecting in what they're saying is extremely important, because a lot of parts of us are quite vulnerable and we do need that kind of connection. And I'm quite agreeable, as I believe I said before. I can't remember if it's in the last part now. My personality is quite agreeable, so it's more natural for me to want to be encouraging with someone or just to hear someone out. And I do feel that I do a fairly good job at being nonpartisan in situations. But at the same time, there are times where something will come up that I think like for me, I've just come to start knowing this over time. Like, it's just this sense that, no, I should probably say my thing there. Or it's like, I think it's not just this sense of like, no, I have to always be my thing. It's not like this kind of like macho sense of like, no, this is how I think it is. It's not really that. It's more just like there's this sense of like, no, I actually feel like I have to, push back on that or stand my ground against this thing that's coming up, or sort of like maybe actually correct this because it's not really a reflection of the thing that I was saying. But I've noticed over time how these things can clash. And finding that balancing act between them is not always particularly easy. So seeing this in relationships and just everyday situations in my life, I mean, some of the benefits of it are, I think, when you start to notice this dichotomy, it also helps you refine your understanding of or for me, it's helped me refine my understanding of what a truth is to me and how to recognize if something's authentic for me, and also how love works in my relationships, right? Like sometimes it's just very obvious that it's like, oh, this is like someone's feeling really insecure here, and there might be some holes in something that they're saying, but it is more pertinent right now to validate what's being said and actually just listen and hold space, because that's really where the energy is moving here. And I would do best to trust that and follow it. And also, like in another situation, it's like this person is kind of holding on to that. And, there is some kind of like, there's something I want to say that's coming up for me. So I have to be able to be authentic. So it's like, I feel it's helped me have a better sense of what's true, and then also how connection works with other people. But I think the negative would be quite self-evident, which is that sometimes you just don't want to do that. Right? But your integrity kind of speaks for itself, I think, if you start listening to it. It's like, no, I don't want to bullshit in this situation, or no, I don't want to gloss over someone who I feel like needs that space, or who I could provide that connection to, or even if I need to provide that connection to myself. And I also think it goes the other way as well. Like there's nothing more annoying than when you're having a hard time and you just want someone to hear you. You want someone to be in that space with you, and all they do is tell you how to solve the problem. It's infuriating. And vice versa, like you might need practical advice from someone or help with something, and they've interpreted it as like oh, everything's going to be okay, and you're like, no, I know everything's going to be okay, but I actually need help. So I think learning how to register that has been helpful and more important for me than just kind of leaving it and sort of assuming that I'm right all the time, or assuming that I can't speak my mind all the time. So that's something I've noticed over time as well. That's going to be everything for this one. I am planning to make a part 2 because there's so many of these things I actually just want to communicate. I actually just liked saying these things, even just as like a video diary entry. It's just been nice to speak some of these things out loud. It helps me sort of clarify my thoughts on these things. If you enjoyed this and you haven't already, I appreciate you subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing this with anyone you feel like might get value out of it, commenting down below. My email is in the description, blah, blah, blah. I hope you're having a beautiful day, and I'll see you very soon in part 2. See you later.